Hey, my name is Maria Ingalla and welcome to my channel. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I'm here to break down some complicated psychiatric information about medications, diagnoses, and all that fun stuff so you can actually understand what's going on versus being in your doctor's office and being like, what happened? So today we're going to talk about guanfacine and I'm super excited about that. One of my favorite things to do is look at the history of medications. So as far as guanfacine, it was created around 1960, 1970s, and it was made as an alpha-2 adrenergic agonist. This is something that works in the brain to lower your blood pressure. So originally it was made for health reasons, not for psychiatric reasons. But around 1980s, 1990s, researchers and doctors started saying like, hey, the kids who are taking this for health are actually like more chill. They're more focused. They're calmer. They're less anxious. They're less hyperactive. Like, let's look into this. And then around 2009, Intuitive came out, which is the extended release version of guanfacine. This is now something that's used off-label in psychiatry for like substance use disorders, for PTSD, for anxiety, for sleep, for mood, for a lot of different things. So it is cool to see how it's really expanded into psychiatry from an off-label perspective. I feel like the most pressing conversation usually about medications is what are the side effects? Are there any long-term implications of this medication? Guanfacine is actually one of the more chill medications. The biggest most like intense side effect I see with it is tiredness or sleepiness. And this is usually with the extended release version. I always note that it comes for like 3 to 4 days, right? And like day 4, day 5, you should be waking up and feeling no longer tired, no longer super sedated. And then you can actually see how the medication's working. Why? It actually reaches its steady state, which is like the normal blood level of where it's supposed to be in about that time frame. So when it reaches there, side effects lessen, and then you're actually seeing how it's working. Some people have fainting spells, usually if their blood pressure goes too low. So we don't want to take this if we have really low blood pressure in the first place. Dry mouth is really common. Dizziness can happen too. I usually really recommend anybody who's taking this to drink like a really good amount of water and still have salty snacks. So we don't want to just be drinking a ton of water because we're going to still be dehydrated. So we want to make sure there's salt there too in our diets. A little bit about dosing and combinations. It comes in an instant, immediate release and an extended release. If it's an immediate release, I usually like to start people around like 1/4 of a tab to a 1/2 a tab of a 1 milligram. 1 milligram is as low as it comes in. It is more potent than the extended release. And I usually like to bypass the side effects of, sleepiness and all of that. So my way to do that is typically to reduce the dose and take it 2 to 3 times a day, depending. Each dose lasts about 6 hours for that one. And then eventually my goal is to move it over to an extended release and do like a 1 milligram at bedtime. Sometimes I end up doing for somebody who needs like 4 milligrams, I'll split it and do 1 milligram in the morning and 3 milligrams at night of extended release. And that helps it kind of disperse out through the day a little bit better. And then as far as combination, so a lot of kids and a lot of adults having a combination of guanfacine plus a stimulant is like peanut butter and jelly. It just ends up being a great combination where the stimulant's helping to increase the dopamine and the norepinephrine in places it needs to be. And then guanfacine is just kind of cutting out all that extra noise and anxiety and impulsivity and hyperactivity and just kind of chilling you out where you're supposed to be chilled out. So I love that combination for a lot of people. It's great for people who have bipolar disorder because it doesn't cause cycling. Sometimes stimulant medications can actually cause bipolar disorder to worsen and cause mood cycling. For some people, they actually cause hallucinations, so that can be scary. People who have anxiety might have like jitters or feel more nervous on stimulants or just be really sensitive to them. So it doesn't cause that. So that's always a good thing. And it's like amazing for the type of ADHD that has the impulsivity component because it gives you a couple extra seconds to think about things before doing them, which is really good for kids because God knows like teenagers need it. Same. Hyperactivity too, it can really help with, and like amazing for PTSD, one of probably my favorite medications for that too. So how does it work? It works on something called the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of our brain. And that part of our brain is what is responsible for memory and planning and focus and impulse and all of the things that we struggle with ADHD. And it works on a neurotransmitter named norepinephrine. This is something that's implicated in ADHD for both attention and emotional regulation. It works by activating what's called an alpha-2 receptor, and it helps to balance out the norepinephrine. Oftentimes people might think like stimulants are going to fix ADHD because they're going to increase dopamine, and stimulants also increase norepinephrine. Guanfacine does something a little bit different, and it starts to actually decrease it. By decreasing it, it's starting to prevent overstimulation in the brain, and it allows more focus because it cuts down a lot of that like extra noise. People with ADHD often say that like their brain is never quiet. And while stimulants might help to quiet some people's noise, it doesn't help with everybody. So this can help with a lot of people who have like the racing thoughts, anxiety, and like those impulsive, hyperactive, I can't sit still kind of vibes going on. So we have to remember that ADHD is not a deficit of norepinephrine. That has nothing to do with it. There's like lots of different norepinephrine and neurotransmitters in different areas of your brain. The prefrontal cortex is something that often needs just balance there for norepinephrine, and guanfacine does that. So one thing to know is if you have a kid who's been exposed to trauma, often that trauma will present the same as a hyperactive or impulsive ADHD. Even for kids who have, you know, like indirect ongoing trauma, whether it's like a history of abuse or bullying or anything like that, it can often just look like restlessness, anxiousness, and it's hard to differentiate between that. If you have somebody who's been adopted in the family, often like that's what it looks like too. So with guanfacine, it works really phenomenally on trauma too. And it's one of my favorite medications for child psych because so much of child psych is actually just trauma. So different things it works on. So when we think about norepinephrine, it is something that's implicated in fight or flight, especially with PTSD. There's too much of it. We have something called the amygdala, which is our threat response center in our brain, where it goes into fight or flight, and it's telling you like, is there a threat? Is there not a threat? What do I do? So guanfacine goes in, chills it out, so it's not so overstimulated anymore. And then it also still works in the prefrontal cortex, where it's kind of calming down and cutting all that extra noise out. Norepinephrine is also something that, like, if you have too much of it when you're sleeping, that's where you get nightmares. If you have too much of it during the day and you have like stressful events or triggers, that can lead to flashbacks. So there's a lot of different ways that it helps with PTSD that I just like love it for. I think it's really great. So if there's anything you want to see on here, go ahead and leave a comment and I will work on a video for you. And also, don't forget to like and hit subscribe. Let's start sharing and getting the word out about a more authentic and real look at mental health, because we don't have enough of this right now in this world.